Good morning, folks. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate so many folks logging on and bearing with us as we got organized on our side. But I appreciate everybody logging in here today. My name's Chris Green, and you'll hear more from me a little bit later, but I'm the president of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association. And looking forward to this today. We've had a lot of work going on related to our hydrogen hub, which we hope to share with you all. And we've got some time at the end here for some questions as well. So hopefully this will be the first of more engagements with our autonomous indigenous tribes here in the Pacific Northwest. In my background, working for the state of Washington Department of Commerce, and in much of my career have worked with tribes quite a bit on trying to figure out how to do economic development projects, how to grow jobs, and more recently, a lot around climate and clean energy. And so I think what we wanted to do today is have just a specific webinar or a time to communicate with tribes and understand where there's some opportunity for partnerships or opportunities to answer some questions, if there are some, about what the future of hydrogen looks like, what the hydrogen economy looks like, what some of the projects we're going to be doing look like. And so really glad that you all attended. We'll try to make good use of your time. We've got some good folks on the agenda today that we're going to get to. And before we start that, what I would like to do just briefly is turn to my colleague, Jackie Perez, to do a brief land acknowledgement with this group before we begin. Jackie, are you on and can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Take it away.
Wonderful. Good morning and welcome to the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association's tribal webinar. I'm Jackie Perez. I'm the operating director for the association. I wanted to start off our virtual meeting today by recognizing the ongoing legacy of the Indigenous peoples. As the original stewards of the land, we honor their continued presence in our community. I acknowledge and give thanks to the land on which we are living and working today, and to the people who have cared for it. This land is of the Indigenous people who came before me. We commit that we will only take what is needed from this land, leaving enough for the people who come after us. This is something I think about every time I have the chance to offer thanks to those who were here before me and those who did the same for me, so that I may live on this land. With the spirit of reconciliation, I also commit to learning more about our region's Indigenous communities and to share all that I learn with my children and the people in my life. We know that community isn't about geography or where we are from, but true community is about connecting with others and understanding what we have in common. I would like to welcome everybody to please take a moment wherever you are and acknowledge the land you are on and pay your respects to the elders of this land, past and present. Thank you.
Thanks,
Chris?
Jackie. Thank you very much. I know land acknowledgements on a virtual session sometimes are, not the norm, but I think it's important for the body of work that we're doing here as we think about the land and natural resources quite a bit. And we're thinking about that in the context, in our case, of how do we battle climate change? How do we decarbonize? How do we make sure that we take care of some of these things that we need to fix? So appreciate the words, Jackie. Thank you for doing that. All right. Well, as we get started here, we're going to go through a few slides. So I'm your first cruise director here. So you're stuck with me for at least a few more minutes. Can we go to the next slide, whoever is in control? Very good. So as you can see on the agenda here, we're now in the phase one overview. So after myself, we're going to hear from Kate McAteer, who is leading our PNWH2 community benefits plan. So you're going to hear a little bit about how we intend to do a little more community engagement. And then we've got some really great folks coming up after that. Zoe High Eagle Strong is working with the hub as well as WSU, and is going to be working with us on tribal engagement. Very important part of this work that we're going to be doing with the Hydrogen Hub funds is working with tribes and trying to understand, like I said earlier, where there are some opportunity for partnerships, or we can make sure we have open lines of communication and dialogue as we undertake what is one of the largest, if not the largest, programs the Department of Energy has ever conducted in the Hydrogen Hubs program. So I'm glad that we've got Zoe on board. Zoe's going to introduce us to Carrie Rosenbaum, her colleague, so we'll hear from him later. And then we've got a gentleman from the Department of Energy, Brian Donchada. Sorry, Brian, if I butchered that. My apologies. Who's going to speak a little bit later from the Department of Energy, who does tribal engagement for the feds. So, very excited about our agenda today. Let's maybe go to the next slide. So I wanted to start by just talking about a little bit, very high level, an overview of what is the hydrogen hub. So just and you can read the words here in our vision statement, so that give you a little bit more sort of directionally the kinds of things we're thinking about, or our thought process, and how we're approaching this work. But I'll just kind of start really high level and talk about basics. The Department of Energy put out an $8 billion program a couple of years ago. This was funded in the IIJA, or Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And in the end of that, they had lots of applications, people applying to be hydrogen hubs across the country. Our group put forward an application and was awarded a $1 billion grant. And 7 of those grants actually went out around the country, and they all were for about $7 billion. And so there are hydrogen hubs around the country like ours. The other ones are in California, North Dakota, Indiana and Illinois, Appalachia up through Western Pennsylvania, in the Mid-Atlantic, and then down in Texas, that you've got a hub based out of Houston. So you've got 7 of these hubs around the country, each awarded about $1 billion. And basically, what we are doing is we are leveraging that $1 billion from the federal government against private sector funds that have come forward to plan to build out hydrogen production and related facilities across our region in the Pacific Northwest. And I'll talk a little bit more about sort of where some of these projects are and what they are here shortly. But the main point of this was to try to figure out a way to decarbonize one of the hardest to decarbonize parts of our economy. And a lot of that is it's replacing transportation fuel. We've got a lot of work to do in that space, and EVs are doing a good job of some of that by decarbonizing passenger vehicles, but some of the hardest to decarbonize places are still remain. Really big boats, really big trucks, really big buses, things that use diesel right now, basically. Trying to figure out a way or an alternative that is a clean energy, clean burning, low emission or zero emission alternative to those kinds of fossil fuels is really important. It's one of the hardest things we're doing. So that's the reason for trying to generate so much more hydrogen production in this country. And that's the role I think that we are playing, which is try to get this to what we call market liftoff, and try to get to a place where we can have enough hydrogen fuel in supply in the market that is at least competitive enough from a price point with existing fossil fuels, but also has the ability for us to like I said, decarbonize and create a bunch of new jobs as we generate the next generation of clean fuel technology. So that's the main reason we're here. There are some things that I think are important to our hub, and some of these are shared and some of these are prescribed based on the requirements in the funding from the federal government. Department of Energy is quite concerned and wants to make sure that we are doing right by communities and doing right by our tribal nations in this country. And so they are watching to ensure that we are doing these kinds of things. But I'll tell you, just from my experience and the work that I've done in my career, I think it's really important just to acknowledge the leadership of these tribes and their autonomous states to make sure that we communicate with them and then try to figure out where there's partnerships. And I want to try to go a bit beyond that here as we go through 8 years of this hydrogen hub program and try to figure out along the way, are there ways for tribes to benefit economically? I know we have some tribes that have reached out to us and have lots of property assets or real property assets, and to talk about where we can put projects and those kinds of things. And I think that's great. I also think it's great when tribes are interested in a different kind of investment, maybe equity investments or other kinds of things where they are able to profit from this green energy transition that lots of other people are going to. It would be important for us, and I think a milestone for us, to try to learn where there are ways for tribes to benefit from this economically. So those are some of the things that we're quite interested in addition to climate change and decarbonization. Next slide. So we'll talk more about these things here when we get to community benefits as well. But as I mentioned, it's not just about building these projects out in the region. We talk about green jobs a lot. And as any politician talks about climate change, or we take really tough votes to vote for new climate change related policies like the cap and trade programs around the country, or low carbon fuel standards, or things that we know are going to help pursue our goals of decarbonization of the economy. We also talk about jobs. We talk about jobs a lot. Electeds talk about jobs a lot. And so in this case, our estimation is that if we do all the build out, if all the projects in our hub happen and they happen on time and they happen the way that we have them envisioned, we'll minimally create around 10,000 jobs in the region, new jobs in green energy. And we're really excited about that. In most cases, they're well-paid jobs. They're at least average wages in each of those communities, and there's ability for a lot higher earning positions in those new projects as well. So we're very excited about the ability to bring new jobs into the marketplace, and in doing that in a way that's we're kind of building from the ground up in some of these cases. Some of these projects really aren't going to start to get into production or start to hire people for their facilities for a few years. So we want to work with our workforce and education partners to develop systems and training and options for folks to get the right skills required to enter these positions. And so those things are quite important to us. And as you can imagine, being here from Washington State and my experience in state government, and many others could speak to this too, doing that in a way that is with the most equitable lens we possibly can have. And there's been a lot of work in this space, I know, at the state levels. It's important to us as well that we have an eye toward and a mind toward DEI, and we're thinking about avoiding the sins of the past, so to speak, where lots of big industrial facilities got sited in low-income neighborhoods. There's a history of that in this country, and we're trying to stem that tide and reverse it a bit here with this program to have more advanced conversations with folks as we start to build these things out. So those are some of the things we're concerned about as we go forward and spend all this money. Next slide, please. So I'll spend a few minutes here just talking about some of the projects and the locations. And I'll start up in Washington State at Node 2. And each of these nodes may contain more than one project, but they are connected in a localized value chain. And so that's why we've kind of grouped them together. I'll just note there's a lot more information on our website about these projects. We haven't produced all of the information about all of these projects quite yet. And the reason for that is in many cases, we are still in negotiations and contract negotiations with many of the projects to iron out the final details about this 8-year program that they are entering into. So there's, as you can imagine, like any good government program, lots of requirements to make sure we're doing it correctly. So that's taken a bit more time. I'm sure we'll have more information about these projects online sometime soon. But in the meantime, I'll start with Node 2. Node 2 is led by ALA Renewables. This is a company that's affiliated with AltaGas. It's a Canadian company. They're going to produce green electrolytic hydrogen at a site near Bellingham. And what I mean by that, when I say green electrolytic hydrogen, what I mean is a clean hydrogen. It's basically using water and electricity to produce hydrogen molecules. There are other ways to produce hydrogen using natural gas or other methods, and those are a little bit different. Those require some carbon capture technology and can come with some emissions related to the creation of that hydrogen. What we are striving for here, and what we've committed to the Department of Energy and electeds in all of the states that we're participating in, is that our hydrogen will be green. Electrolytic produced hydrogen. That's the greenest you can get, and also has the lowest emission profile of any of the hydrogen that we're aware of. So ALA Renewables in Bellingham is going to produce, let's say, around 100 tons a day of hydrogen or somewhere thereabouts, and they'll sell that into the marketplace for local transportation uses. Some of that will go to be liquefied and stored in liquid form and then move to where the point source or the customers are. And some of that will be in gas form and sold to customers that need it in that form. So we'll have good production going on in that area. Moving down I-5 a bit more, I'll go to Node 7. So Node 7 is a transit organization. So Twin Transit is our lead organization in this node, and they are really looking to try to change the paradigm of transit propulsion technologies. So right now, most buses around the state require diesel. Many of these transit agencies have moved to battery buses in some cases. What we are learning is fuel cell buses, hydrogen fuel cell buses also have a zero emission profile, but have a little bit more flexibility or dexterity to go on longer routes or stay in operation longer because you don't have as much of the charging downtime you do with batteries. And so looking to see where we can help generate more interest in transit agencies all across the Northwest. And we're happy that Twin Transit's taken the lead there in Node 7 to start that process. So very excited about that. Shifting over to Central Washington, Central Northern Oregon. I'll speak to Node 4 briefly. Node 4 we're really excited about this. It's a fertilizer company. It's a company called Atlas Agro, and they're going to also produce green electrolytic hydrogen at that location in Richland, Washington. And that's going to be 100% of that will be used for the creation of fertilizer. So they'll use hydrogen to convert to ammonium nitrate and basically make a green fertilizer product. And what's beautiful about this is two things. One, it's an ability to decarbonize or start to prove out that you can decarbonize fertilizer, which of course right now is quite dependent on fossil fuel inputs to produce that and creates a lot of emissions. We can do that with hydrogen and reduce emissions, create a green fertilizer. So that's just the first great thing about that. The second, to me, is the ability for us to produce hydrogen or produce fertilizer locally. Most of our fertilizer, if not all of it, gets imported from places pretty far away. Having some ability to produce it locally is also quite great for all of our climate related goals and just for localized product ability for our very important ag sector. So very excited about that. Moving down into Oregon and the Boardman, Oregon area, we've got nodes 3 and node 6. And node 6 is going to be led by Mitsubishi, also producing green electrolytic hydrogen, and partnering with a few folks, notably in node 3, a company called Air Liquide that's going to purchase some of that and then liquefy it. And again, similar to what ALA is thinking about up in Bellingham, move that product to where the customers are in liquid form. And so we've got kind of two operations going on in the Boardman, Oregon area. But again, another great opportunity to get supply into the market and then get that fuel to places where it can be used to displace diesel fuel in most cases presently. Moving down I-84 just a little bit near Baker City, we've got a very cool project, small project, but a very cool project called Express Ranch Hydrogen. And they're going to produce 4 or 5 tons a day, which in the grand scheme of things might sound pretty small when you've got companies that are going to produce hundreds of tons a day in other parts of the country. But 4 or 5 tons a day to get started for green electrolytic hydrogen will be used for local mining companies that are trying to decarbonize their mining truck operations. And so, not the biggest project in our portfolio, but a very important one and strategically located on a very key transportation corridor. So we're excited about that. Lastly, I'll just mention St. Regis, Montana. We've got a very cool project out there. Again, a small project, key location on I-90 and a corridor that's very important to us to be on these major transportation corridors, as you can see most of our projects are. And they're going to use solar power out there in Montana to create green electrolytic hydrogen and again, supply that to local transportation customer offtake markets. And so that's kind of what our projects look like right now. We've got one additional node, node 1, that I didn't mention that is going through some adjustments right now and it's going to be more regional. But we're really excited about the ability for companies like Amazon and Puget Sound Energy to be able to access green electrolytic hydrogen for their various needs as a part of that node. So more to come on that as we make some adjustments. And that node will sort of, like I said, be a little more regional. Maybe we'll go to the next slide here, and then I think I'm going to wrap. I think I'll just end with this part here and just mention kind of where we are in the process right now. So you see the red arrow pointing to where we're at. There's a bunch of work that has taken place over the last couple of years to get to this point. Lots of writing of applications, lots of contract negotiations with the Department of Energy, and lots of sort of paperwork preparation. And now we're into phase 1. This is a 4-phase process through the duration of the next 8 years. But phases 1 and 2, as you can see just up above in that green colored ribbon on the top, is going to be a lot of the NEPA process or environmental regulatory review process. And so we're just starting to kick that process off right now. That's going to take a little bit of time. We're basically going to do a programmatic EIS that covers all of the projects in the entirety of the region. So that's 3 different states. And so that's a little bit complex for anybody who's done EIS related work in the past. It will be a bit complex, but we're just kicking that off now. So that's going to take a little while to get through. The beautiful part of that, though, is anybody that knows anything about an EIS is that there's going to be some more milestones and opportunities quite intentionally and designed for getting more feedback from folks, written communication back on some of these plans. And so we'll have lots of, I think, steps along the way for formal and informal communication as we go. So a lot more work to do, and looking forward to executing all this stuff and hopefully working together and listening a little bit more to see what we can learn along the way about how we proceed in the most effective way. I think I will stop there. I appreciate you all listening to me drone on for a little bit. Hopefully some of that was interesting, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kate McAteer.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate McAteer. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at Washington State University's Tri-Cities campus in Richland, Washington, but also the community benefits lead for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. Next slide, please. So the community benefits planning process, in order for us to get this award, involved some significant stakeholder analysis. And during that analysis, we actually identified 212 stakeholder groups. There are more, but which we're continuing to look at. But initially, we identified 212, of which 16 were tribes or tribal nations located near or adjacent to the projects that Chris had just shown you on the map. Obviously, we are interested in hearing from more tribes, from anyone that is interested in talking to us about the Hydrogen Hub. And so this is the beginning of our outreach, is holding webinars such as this, but also, as we'll talk about later, you can reach out to us via our website or email to talk more about these community benefits that I'm going to briefly describe now. So part of the community benefits plan is really to and it's what the Department of Energy is calling investment in the American workforce. And part of our goal is to establish a regional coalition of education programs, training programs, to really ensure that we are looking at the entire pipeline so that we will have a sustaining workforce for a hydrogen economy in the Pacific Northwest. So we anticipate around 10,000 jobs during the construction phases of these projects. But obviously, there are many indirect jobs that result from the construction of these significant projects and their ongoing operations could be create many jobs in our communities. So part of the community benefits plan for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub does involve what we refer to as the Justice 40 initiative. So the Biden administration introduced the Justice 40 initiative to ensure that 40% of the benefits of clean energy projects that are availing of federal funding, that 40% of those benefits will flow to disadvantaged communities. These could be things like, obviously, I've talked about jobs, reduced environmental and health disparities in regions, and also, say, improving economic impact in these regions. And I'll go to the next slide, please. So part of the Justice 40 work really does, it begins with talking to communities and talking to tribes about what are the benefits that you would like to see as part of this hydrogen hub that's going to be developed in the Pacific Northwest. So we have a well-developed community engagement strategy that, as Chris said, we are now implementing as part of phase 1. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you will see it all begins with community engagement and stakeholder feedback. So we want to hear from you, how you want us to engage with you, and how you want to learn about the potential benefits and how we might mitigate any negative impacts in the communities where we're going to be doing this work. Each of the nodes that Chris discussed on the map will actually have a community advisory board, and we welcome people to let us know if they would like to be part of that advisory board, or just to find out ways that they can have representation on these community advisory boards. So every node in our project will have what we refer to as a CAP. The community advisory boards then will have what we refer to as a community benefits committee that has been put in place by our board, our Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association board, to really receive feedback from those advisory boards about what's working well, perhaps we could be doing better in these communities, and also advising those boards, giving them advice on how they might best respond to concerns, not always just concerns, but good ideas that their communities are bringing forth. So it's really an iterative process that you can see here, with feedback being received and being responded to throughout the lifetime of these projects, not just now while we're thinking about where these projects are going to be, but as they continue to be constructed and go into operations, these advisory boards will continue to be in place. Next slide, please. So I mentioned already that we're really trying to put in place a coalition where we will have representatives from labor and unions, from our K-12 school systems, from two-year colleges, from four-year colleges, and also emphasis on minority serving institutions. And we will be working with Northwest Indian College in a lot of this work. So I'm not going to get into this slide in detail, but it's basically just talks about some of the programs that we will be putting in place to really help develop or ensure that students in the K-12 system understand clean energy and understand what a hydrogen economy is, helping them develop an interest, and then how do we prepare them to enter the workforce, and once they are in the workforce, how do we help people advance into higher level positions if they so choose? Okay, so next slide, please. Before I introduce, we're now going to talk more specifically about our engagement with tribes and tribal nations. But before I do that, I do see, no, we can jump back, please, to this slide. I do see that Chairman Ayal from the Cowlitz Indian Tribe is on. And Chairman Ayal is a member of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Board. And I was just wondering if the chairman would like to come off mute and maybe say a few words. If he's still on. Well, maybe he's not, but maybe, or if he's getting ready, he can join, come say a few words at the end. So I'll now turn it over to Professor Zoe High-Eagle-Strong. Zoe is a member of the Nez Perce, and she is the leading the tribal engagement strategies for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. Zoe is also the Vice Provost for Tribal Relations at Washington State University, and we are so excited to have Zoe as part of our team. So Zoe.
Excellent. Well, Tatsmewi, everyone. My Indian name is Huku, and it's a privilege to be a part of this work, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I want to speak a little bit more detailed about the Tribal Community Benefits Plan. Kate did a great job kind of providing an overview of the general Community Benefits Plan, and we want to be clear that, you know, as we think about the Community Benefits Plan, that we are really committed to fully working with tribes as sovereign nations. And at WSU, part of why we are part of the Tribal Community Benefits Plan is we have an executive policy, an MOU agreement with Northwest Tribes, and executive policy for tribal engagement, consultation, and consent. And I believe that training our partners in the industry and at the node and community level is really critical to ensuring that there's meaningful partnerships developed with the node teams and the regional tribes. Our goal is to establish a tribal community benefits plan, which is centered around addressing tribal concerns, mitigation plans, and prioritizing benefits that are of interest and priorities for tribes. Some of the key examples of key benefits could include economic development, workforce development, and pathways to clean energy and careers. That's why our connection with Northwest Indian College and other universities and other training avenues that are have specialized with Native students and with Native communities is really critical. Other benefits are just our mutual commitment on sustainability and stewardship of natural resources and wildlife. The role of the Tribal Communities Benefit Team is focused on tribal engagement and consultation, separate from the formal government to government consultations. We are not trying to take that place, that the government to government consultation will be handled. And in a minute, you'll meet Brian Odanka. Odananka, sorry, we keep pronouncing, I'm so apologize. But Odananka, who is a tribal liaison for the Department of Energy, and he'll introduce himself in a moment. But our focus is specifically on the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub and developing a tribal community benefits plan. We believe that it's fundamental for our long-term success with the hub is that we establish continuous and meaningful engagement with tribes. Therefore, we began the engagement with tribes prior to the hub proposal being submitted to DOE. And within the 8 nodes, we acknowledge that they are near numerous tribal nations with shared pathways. And so the engagement process is very complex, and we are trying to do outreach at various levels. First, at the Department of Energy at the government to government level, and then as hubs, each node to engage with their regional tribes, and then us as a tribal community benefits planned to ensure that there is numerous outreach, whether it's at tribal conferences, visiting with tribal consultation and formal consultation, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But we do have, Kate mentioned the 15 tribes that have already been intentionally engaged with and received letter supports from Confederated Tribes of Chehalis Reservation and Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation and also Cowlitz tribe. We also present at several conferences, the Tribal Energy Conference, Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, and we'll continue that ongoing engagement. Some other examples of tribal involvement and representation are also just through our communication channels. We created a website that we'll talk about at the end and give you the link, and there is a tribal engagement link that I really encourage. We're trying to stay up to date on our outreach, our information, and then there's a comment section that you can ask questions or do direct outreach or just get documented responses if you need that. Please ask any questions through that website. Just our next steps, our engagement plan is to facilitate ongoing dialogue with tribal nations. I'll introduce you to our team here in a moment. We also, I mentioned the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub website, which is a really important way to stay up to date and outreach. Also, we will be committed to attending the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indian Conference, the 3 conferences per year, and the Tribal Energy Summit. And Natural Resource Summit, we will be attending here. That's coming up next month. I am also the chair for the higher ed subcommittee for the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, so I'll also stay connected through that way. And so I just also want to mention other ways that we will be committed to ongoing engagement is through listening sessions and formal consultation. So I really, if any tribal leaders are on this webinar, please reach out to tribal. It's really supposed to be tribal.relations@wsu.edu. If you would like for us to schedule a listening session in your community or more formal consultation with your tribal government, I'm happy to present. Now I just want to take a moment to introduce you to, next slide, to Carrie Rosenbaum, and he's a Colville tribal member, and he's a part of our tribal. We just recently hired him, and his position specifically is around tribal community specialist in environmental justice and stewardship, and I'd like to ask him to say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kerry Rosenbaum. A little bit more about me. I'm from the Colville Reservation. I grew up in Chelam, educated here in the Northwest, EWU, Gonzaga, now WSU. So I spent a lot of my career in journalism and communications, covering stories about tribal communities. Many of the communities are going to be involved with this program, so I got a lot of familiarity there, and I'm excited to just get started working with y'all and meeting y'all. So, Lim Lim, thank you.
That's yeah. And next, I'd like to introduce you to Brian Odananka. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Brian. He's going to say a few words. He is the Tribal Liaison, Office of Clean Energy of OSED, Department of Energy, and he's been a really important partner and also have invested in Indian country for a long time. Brian?
Thank you, Zoe, and no worries on the name. I've heard it butchered much worse than that, and I've been called a lot worse, so that's okay. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is Brian O'Donoghue, and I am the Tribal Liaison for the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration at the Department of Energy. Thank you for inviting me here today to introduce myself briefly and to talk about my small role in the great work that's been done. My role is really specifically aimed at ensuring that OSID and DOE remember our tribal trust responsibilities and our federal trust responsibilities with all of the sovereign tribes across the Pacific Northwest and with whom this project or this hub may come in contact. Remembering both the tribes themselves and their off-reservation rights and their treaty rights, and to make sure that those are respected during the process of this work, and to facilitate any government-to-government consultation that is requested or required during the course of this project. I've been working very closely with Kate and Zoe and their team. I've been very impressed by the outreach they've done, but I want to just remind all tribal nations that we will be working with that they can always come and talk directly with us in light of the unique relationship the federal government has and enjoys with the tribes of the Pacific Northwest. On that, I'll hand it back, but again, thank you for this moment and chance to introduce myself, and I look forward to answering any questions and working with you into the future. Thank you.
That's yeah, Brian, thank you. Now it's time in our webinar to have our panelists answer a few pre-selected questions that were submitted by our webinar participants. At the end, after our panelists answer a few questions, please start thinking about just any comments that you would like to make around tribal community benefits, whether that is potential impact and benefits that you'd like to see, or concerns that you feel need to be considered in mitigation. Right now, we have three questions that I will, if the panelists can join us.
Zoe, can we just we're gonna go off script. I apologize, but I'm gonna just ask Kate real quick to chime in, and we'll take a brief detour and come right back to questions. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got some of our technology issues resolved, and Chairman Ayal is actually now available to say a few remarks. So Chairman Ayal. Chairman, I think you're mute. Could we unmute the chairman, please? So Chairman, it looks we're still having issues hearing you. Oh. Well, oh, I'm sorry. I is everyone having issues, or is it just me?
No, we can't hear as well.
I think let's do this. I don't know if someone can contact the chairman. Sorry, sir. We'll try to get it sorted, but let's, in the meantime, maybe so let's proceed with some questions as you were. And if we can get something sorted, chairman or someone just give us a signal and we'll come back to you because I think it'd be great if you said a few words. But how about that? Let's proceed for now, Zoe.
Excellent. And how about, and we'll ask Chairman Ayel to maybe make some closing remarks at the
I like that idea. I like that a lot.
that would be great. So a few questions, if I could have our panelists join us. There's a few questions that the webinar participants have submitted. And the first question is, how can hydrogen startup how can a hydrogen startup get involved with the PNWH2 and other requirements from tribal requirements? I don't know. I'm a little unclear with that, but that's a question.
Want me to take a crack at that one,
Yeah.
Zoe? Okay.
Mhm.
Well, if we got it right, and if we didn't, please correct us or update the question. But I'd say we definitely are interested in entrepreneurs or business startups or new entrants into this marketplace. It's a pretty new nascent place to be. There's not a hydrogen market or a green hydrogen market really that exists right now. The only hydrogen out there is basically produced within the refining industry value chain for their oil refining projects. And so as we kind of launch this new industry, this new energy commodity market, absolutely, we have an eye toward trying to find out where there's some new entrants that can come into this space and make some money. And there's probably lots of different places to do that. Certainly, there's the science part of it and the producing of the hydrogen part of it, but there's all manner of infrastructure needs that are going to be required for this to be able to be stored and transported and then used in different kind of fuel cell technologies or other technologies. And so we do have the Charge organization, which was created prior to the launch of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association. So Charge is a hydrogen cluster group. This is modeled after, it's a cluster sort of initiative kind of modeled after how folks in Europe and Asia do these kinds of things. But the point is to try to get new people into that space, kind of create more center of gravity in a certain region around a certain technology or industry, in this case, hydrogen. And so they're constantly working with companies to try to figure out where they can make connections to partners, customers, suppliers, but also, we're looking at how we can get more incentives and more resources to these kinds of projects that are going to be starting up. So if anybody out there is thinking about trying to do something in this value chain or do something in this space or be a part of a supply chain to some company that's producing, I would recommend getting in touch with the Charge organization who are affiliated with us at the Hydrogen Hub, and we can provide their information at the end here, but that would be the best place to start to try to engage and try to meet some people.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, what specific policies, plans are in place to assess health risks to H2 workers?
I think that might have been answered in the chat. I did see a question related to that. We'll of course have lots of analysis on this space, mostly working with our government partners that have oversight in these fields. But I think, Zoe, we answered that question in the chat already.
Okay. Next question, are there plans for both statewide hydrogen pipeline and hydrogen refueling station networks?
Take a stab at that one. Yeah, so we are at the very beginning of planning out, I'd say, significant infrastructure around the region for all of the above. I would say right now we do not intend or have designs on an extensive pipeline network as part of this hub. There are some pipelines that are proposed. They're very short run pipelines that are from sort of production source to, say a liquefaction source or location, something like that. We have not, though, gone down the path of re-envisioning or imagining like a natural gas style pipeline network in this region. So that's not where we're going to spend our money. And pipelines are great. You can move product pretty easily and efficiently and cheaply that way. And that would be helpful to probably get the price of hydrogen down low enough for it actually to compete and take hold in the market. But at the moment, that's not where we're headed. So we think hydrogen probably will be moved mostly by truck, maybe a little bit of rail in the near term, and we'll see as we go how effective it is to maybe produce some more pipelines. But everybody knows that pipelines are quite tricky, they're complicated, and they can be problematic to construct. So that's kind of where we are in pipelines. And then in terms of fueling stations, absolutely, we will need a robust network of fueling stations for folks to access this product. And in the near term, we really think that's going to come down to transit organizations, so passenger buses or coaches, and freight transportation, semi trucks. And so working a lot right now with ports and other fueling station locations to see where might it be the most effective to try to have some of those fueling stations located around the Northwest. And you can see from our map where the projects are. We were intentional about trying to stay on those main interstate corridors and build out from there. But yeah, as we go in the future here, just as you've seen EV charging stations pop up, I don't think we'll need quite that many because we're not really right now anticipating a huge offtake in the passenger vehicle market. But for trucks and buses and things like that, and eventually marine fuels, yeah, we will need some more fueling stations at some of these locations. And so that is on the agenda. That's going to take a bit of time, and we're fortunate to have Department of Energy do a little bit of forward thinking here, and they've got a little bit of additional resource from that initial $8 billion appropriation for the Hydrogen Hub program that they're going to invest in what they call the demand initiative, the hydrogen demand initiative. So we're partnering with the folks that are administering those funds, which we think is the design there is to help fund some of this infrastructure that's going to be needed to get offtake, to get customers to actually buy the stuff. And some of that means, yeah, we have to make it available, make it convenient for people to access. So we don't have a timeline established on when those are all going to come to pass. We've got a lot of work to do just to get these projects going and get the hydrogen produced. But we're going to be turning our attention toward things like that and partnering with other hydrogen hubs around the country on these kinds of questions as we try to get more of this fueling station infrastructure established. So more to come, I hope, on that. But we do have a mind toward it. We're not quite there yet.
Thank you. And last question before we take a potential live question and just get feedback from the audience. What are other technologies besides electrolyzers are you considering?
Oh, Ms. McAteer, with your permission, I will attempt that one as well. There's a lot. There's right now in our hub, we only have green electrolytic hydrogen production. As we go forward, and we're going to, things will change along the way. Every single hub out there, all 7 hubs, have had projects drop off for various reasons. It's a long kind of program, and so timing doesn't always work out for everybody. And so we think some of the names of the projects probably will change in all of the hubs over the course of the 8 years, as things change and companies find different ways to make their investment cycles work. And so, we're going to be continuing to work together with folks on all kinds of different hydrogen production, I suppose. But in our case, we're committed to zero carbon. And that's one way we proposed to the DOE. And so we chose to be a green electrolytic hydrogen organization and hub from the very beginning. It doesn't occur to me that there are projects in the Northwest that would work that are quote unquote blue hydrogen using natural gas and a steam methane reform process. Those require carbon capture and those create emissions. And we have been, I think, very straight and narrow attempting to stay in a zero emission, zero carbon hydrogen production hub here in the Northwest. Now, that said, there are some other technologies. Suppose you could have a blue hydrogen that has incredible carbon capture that can be tested and empirically demonstrated, but that's not what we're targeting right now. There are other things like geologic hydrogen. So hydrogen, the most abundant element in the entire universe. It's 75% of the sun, and a whole bunch of other parts of the universe have hydrogen in it. And there's a bunch on Earth. There's a bunch here. And some of it exists underground. There's geologic hydrogen stores that you can go pull out of the ground. And, we're trying to learn more about that to make sure those things can be done in a way that isn't disruptive and doesn't do more harm to the environment than good. But there are ways there other than electrolysis with an electrolyzer to create hydrogen. And we'll have to be thoughtful about how we proceed and evaluate all of these things with lots of input from lots of people, particularly in the environmental community who we work with quite a bit, to make sure we're doing that in a way that's going to be sensible and doesn't do more environmental damage. And so, but as we look ahead at all the electricity needs we've got and all the demand for data centers and all those kinds of things, we'll have to keep trying to find a way to produce hydrogen with the least amount of electricity possible and try to get to the lowest price point if we're going to get the market to actually take hold and for this product to work. And so lots of not competing interests, but a confluence of interests, I would say, in terms of how we proceed. But our mindset, I think, will remain. I can't imagine us changing off of this point that we want zero carbon hydrogen. That's our goal.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I will take one live question here in a minute. I'll look through those, but I do want to take a moment, and we really do want to hear from our webinar participants, and the information sharing is critical to get feedback, but it's really important that we hear from you. And please let us know when it comes to tribal community benefits plans. And as we're moving forward, it just recently got funded. And so now we're at the beginning stages of getting feedback, and these, things are not in construction right now. This is really the critical time to give us feedback in the next year or so. And so please communicate to us what tribal community benefit plans that you would like to see within tribal communities. What are some critical considerations? What are critical concerns that you may have? So if you could please drop that into the chat, because we'd like to be able to download those and also respond to them and document them. And also questions. It sounds like I'm going to maybe choose one or two live questions, and then hopefully Chairman Aiel is able to join and provide some closing remarks. I know
Zoe,
yeah.
while you're doing that, I saw one question I wanted to answer. It'll be super quick here. I think it was from Ted Trainer, it looks like. We're definitely interested in the marine fuel question and transportation questions. We're going to need more companies, more vendors, more folks to step forward and sort of take some of those parts of the value chain. The transportation is going to be a very critical part of how we build this all out. And it's not clear to me that that's all set or spoken for. I think there's going to continue to be lots of opportunities for folks to get into that sector of the value chain, if you will. And at 100%, if there's a tribe that is interested or has an eye toward how they might be able to do something in that space through partnership or however it works, 100% we are interested in working with tribes on any of the parts of the value chain. But I would just answer the question directly. Yeah, I think there are going to be opportunities for how we transport sort of that part of the value chain, how we transport the hydrogen, and certainly when we get into marine fuels, as that comes on a little bit later, we'd love to talk to folks that are interested in being a part of that part of the value chain. Thanks for letting me do a detour there, Zoe.
Excellent. And I'm going to grab a Rye Bow. It says, are we going to address the moral concerns about using water as fuel when we have numerous places in water crisis for drinking and other needs? Doesn't it seem wrong to use water in the fashion when children in the U.S. are dehydrated? So there's a lot of water questions around this. And I know the water usage has been a question. Can you address that, Chris?
I think it's obviously quite important, and there's different places around the country that have a more acute problem with clean water, drinking water especially. And if you look around the globe, of course, we've all seen headlines and news about different places that have been significantly challenged, sort of, historically challenged, where challenges remain. But also, when you look at news out of, South Africa and some places where you don't normally hear about those kinds of problems, having some existential struggles with clean water access, I think it's quite important. Right now, as we look at sort of utilization of all resources and we think about all of it together, right? Water is an input, electricity is an input, trying to be as judicious as possible with how those things get used because they're finite, and we don't have enough of all of them. I think it's quite critical for us to have a very clear mind about how we think about that. And when we do these analysis, when we do NEPA reviews, when we have other environmental agencies weigh in, or we have dialogue with the Sierra Club and all the other partners that we've had along the way, those are the kinds of pieces of input that we're quite interested in. And we've as we have some conversations with tribes, I hope here moving forward with Zoe and Carrie and others, I hope that we hear concerns about water. It's not just about drinking water. We have concerns about how much water comes out of rivers, and we think about our goals around salmon spawning and things like that are important to all of us, myself included, the state and others. So I think it's quite important. I'll just note that in our analysis thus far, the water used in some of these hydrogen facilities would be, less than a lot of other industrial uses. So any other industrial use, particularly food processing, but many others actually use quite a bit more water than an electrolyzer facility. But we're quite careful to ensure that any of our projects are, making sure they have legal binding existing water rights for anything that they're going to use. It doesn't occur to me, and I haven't seen any data that indicates this either, that the amount of water that we're going to use as a part of our hydrogen hub sort of, is on the radar at any level, any higher than any other industrial development that's going to be happening. And probably in some cases where we're using less water than some of the other facilities that could be in those places. So it's not an inappropriate question, and I don't tend to diminish it whatsoever. It's quite important to us, but we're approaching it quite thoughtfully, and of course, going to be open to more input along the way. And we've got several instances where we're going to be able to gain that. So appreciate that that's been raised.
Excellent. Well, our time is coming to an end, so I want to give Chairman Aiel a moment to provide closing words. But before that, please reach out to us through the website, www.pnwh2.com, and we will post and respond to your questions and comments on that website. We will also upload this PowerPoint. And again, please reach out at tribal.relations@wsu.edu if you want formal consultation or a listening session. So any last comments, Chris, before I turn it over to Chairman Aiel for closing words?
Can't think of anything compelling to say better than the chairman. I think it's a proper way to end. Zoe, let's proceed.
Okay. Grazie Aiel for everyone joining us today. Chairman Aiel, were you able to get on? You.
So, Chairman Ayal, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that there's so many technical difficulties today, everyone. But he did send me a statement that if we were not able to hear him this time, he did want me to share with all of you. Just for awareness, Chairman Ayal has joined the association's board of directors. He is the chairman of the Confederated Tribes of the Cowlitz. And he wanted to let everybody here know that he's very excited about the opportunities for tribes, tribal enterprises, tribal members for quality jobs, the contracting opportunities, consulting, and many other areas, including resource protection. Chairman Ayal also assisted the association with our recent NEPA review for a contractor, and he has been a wonderful addition to our association and our board of directors. And we just thank you, Chairman Ayal. And we wish we could have heard directly from you, but appreciate you sending us this statement today. Thank you.
Well, maybe I lied, Zoe. I think that thanks for doing all this work. Thanks, Kate, Zoe, and everybody, and Chairman Ayala. Sorry, our apologies for not getting that sorted. And everybody else that was on and listened for a little bit, just greatly appreciate everybody's interest. We got some good questions here, and a few that I think we plan to follow up on a little bit later. We'll make sure the PowerPoint's available. We'd be happy to do this again if it makes sense. I think we'd like to do these, every now and again. And if anybody has specific interests, or certainly as Zoe mentioned earlier, if there's any tribal leadership that wants more formal consultation on any of this, we're willing and able and stand at the ready to be able to address those things upon request. We're also sensitive to not wanting to be too overbearing here, but we wanted to make some times available for us to continue to have some dialogue here. So I hope that some of you will take us up on that. Please feel free to reach out and don't be shy. And even with tough questions around water and things like that, I think we want to be able to address them head on. So appreciate everybody's teamwork here. Appreciate Department of Energy and Brian jumping on to demonstrate the federal government's interests in government to government relationships and keeping those going. And just hope we can talk more. And I look forward to hopefully working with some of you as we try to build out the stuff and try to decarbonize a really hard to decarbonize part of our economy. So thank you very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Chairman, we can hear you now. If you want to say something, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just did the control alternate and space bar, and it switched me into an option to get my mic back. So I found it. Thank you. IT is not one of my areas, but I'm getting there. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And as I said in the chat, there's just huge opportunities for our tribes. I look at some of the locations and I know most of them pretty well. And, St. Regis, and look at the reach that could impact all the tribal communities all around in Montana, Idaho, and Washington. I think there's about 6 or 7 tribes there that can be directly impacted. And we could just travel along this route and we find other tribes at Boardman or even on our statewide process or region-wide processes. And I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I'm just happy to help on the technical side, but I also want to be able to help every tribe along the way just be engaged and find the best solution for each one. I'd love to do that work with the tribes individually, but the education opportunities for our members, I value that above everything else. They're our future and future leaders that can lead us in this new industry. And again, thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone, for your patience. And I'm looking forward to working with you and our communities across the Northwest.
Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciated being able to work with you and all your work on our board thus far, and then your leadership, greatly appreciated. So thank you for your remarks. Okay, we're over time. You guys are wonderful. Thanks for sticking around. All 67 folks that hung on for a few extra minutes. I appreciate it. And we'll sign off here and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.